Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us here at EPM Live today. My name is Jim Patterson, and I'm going to be presenting this topic called Align Projects with Strategic Goals for Maximum Business Value. It's really an overview of our PortfolioEngine solution, which is part of our EPM Live family of products. PortfolioEngine really is about strategic portfolio planning for executives, and we're going to show you what that's all about today. As I had mentioned, PortfolioEngine is one of the family of products that we have. If you look at this from a continuum, on the far left, our Project Engine, which is simple project collaboration online, Work Engine, which is really project execution for all projects and portfolio visibility. PortfolioEngine really brings the full breadth of our capabilities together for really allowing you to do strategic project and portfolio management, as well as all the execution things should you want to do them in tandem. We're going to talk about these things in detail today. If you really look at PPM, Project Portfolio Management, and EPM, Enterprise Project Management capabilities, Work Engine really provides the capabilities that you're looking for in all of these areas. We're going to be focusing today on the PPM capabilities, which is Strategic Project Management and Portfolio Management, the idea of demand management and capturing ideas for projects, and doing portfolio management for intelligent project selection. Ultimately, we want to select the right projects to work on so that we can execute well on the right work. And we're going to talk about how PortfolioEngine helps you to do that. So if we focus on PortfolioEngine, it really provides what we call top-down strategic PPM capabilities. So we want to be able to identify the active portfolio items or projects that we're working on, potential candidates that were being considered to be made part of the active portfolio, be able to do portfolio selection and alignment to make sure that we're working on things that align with our overall business goals and strategies, and do other things that are relevant to our decision process like resource capacity planning, cost planning and budgeting. Being able to look at possible scenarios and do what-if modeling on the right project selections and see what options that we might have and what it's going to take from a resource and cost perspective to do these things. And what's nice about this, we can use PortfolioEngine as a strategic planning tool strictly for executives, or we can combine it with all the project execution capabilities that EPM Live offers with our Work Engine capabilities so that you can go right from this upfront selection process into a full execution mode on those projects and then be able to track actively in that portfolio the status and the health of the portfolio items that you've selected to work on. It really all starts with getting portfolio items in the solution. And in the front, you're probably going to want to put a request in and get this on the radar. You're going to want to request a project, for example, and capture all the attributes and the business case information you might want to evaluate as part of this potential project. So things like the names and the description of the project, the benefits you hope to derive from the project, other things like what you think it's going to cost, etc., as well as other relevant information on where things are at in your life cycle and who the owners are going to be and who's going to manage this and who's going to sponsor the project, and attachment of any documents that you might want around that. These are things that we capture right up front so that when you're looking at even evaluating whether this portfolio request is even worthy of investigation and time and effort associated with that, we can capture that and get it into the mix in an early life cycle stage. But as it progresses as an idea and garners interest and value as a potential project, we want to really put this through a stage gating process. So a portfolio item may be part of a specific stage gate. So for example, you may have your life cycle stages, which we'll show you, which can actually be gone through via an approval and automated workflow process. Different owners could have different stage gate ownerships and management of those stage gates. And also, you can actually have these input forms that actually light up or make available to you stage-specific tabs so that as you get through the progress of a life cycle of a portfolio item, you can start capturing more relevant information as you go through the different stages of the project. So things that you might capture very early on in the request process might be one thing, but there may be additional depth of information you may want to capture later on as this thing gets closer and closer to being a bona fide project candidate. And then the information of really how well do you score and align this project. Information that you want to capture regarding how well this aligns with your business objectives. What's the value it provides as far as revenue or cost? What risk values does it have? What kind of returns do we expect to get? We provide a lot of these attributes out of the box for you, but PortfolioEngine is really a solution that allows us to put the scoring mechanisms in place that are specific to your organization. So if you have scoring that you're doing, say, in spreadsheets today, that's separate and distinct from your project management solution, we can actually incorporate all those different formulas, ratios, and weighted scorings into this solution. Ultimately, as we capture this information about all of our different portfolio items, we can start getting views of the entire portfolio and ranking them by things like their prioritization scores, their ROIs, where things are at from a life cycle stage, etc. Any of the attributes that we're capturing around these portfolio items are things that we can actually garner reports and views from so that we can make good selection and also get visibility into the active projects and how well they're performing. Some of the tools that we offer that really add value to this selection process is the first one I'm going to talk about is capacity planning. From a resource perspective, when you're planning from the top down, not when you actually have project schedules and you're actually bubbling this information up from detailed tasks, from the top down, high-level capacity planning, very early on, one of the questions that gets asked is, what is the resource commitment that's being asked for? What is the ask on the type of resources we're going to need and to what degree are we going to need them? And we're not going to have very detailed planning for this project at that stage. The key here is that for any portfolio item, we can start capturing either in an hours or more of an FTE basis the idea of what are the skill sets that are needed. We can plan just by role, if you like, and be able to say, here's what we're asking for from an effort perspective or an FTE perspective on what it's going to take for this project, what skill types do we need, and how do those translate into a resource requirement that is going to decrement from our overall resource availability potentially. Now, if we do this for each portfolio item and for each potential portfolio item, we can start looking at resource workload organizationally. So if I manage a certain department, for example, I can actually look at across all the projects and all the roles and resources that I have, what is the total demand versus our capacity, and do we have the bandwidth or the wherewithal to do the work that's being asked for, or do we have to pare down our resource ask? Do we have to eliminate certain portfolio items? Do we have to defer or do certain portfolio items later? Or conversely, do we have to contract or hire in order to fill the gaps that are shown by our planning? We can also do very detailed cost management and cost planning for any of these portfolio items. In this regard, we can build very detailed line item budgets. Any budget items that you currently budget to within your organization, we can model those within this solution. Here I'm showing you an example where we have a combination of labor and non-labor costs by month, where the labor is actually built up from a quantity of labor that's needed times a rate, and then hard dollar categories like materials and contracts that allow you to figure out what kind of costs on a time phase basis you're going to need for that. The idea is that you're going to be able to get a total budget for this project and even track actuals and other cost types against this portfolio item, but have a total dollar value that is supported by very detailed line item justification. And as we start looking at our portfolio later on, as we go active on this, we can start looking at our budget versus our actuals and see very definitively where we're exceeding or doing better than our budget on any of the project or portfolio items that we're managing. As we're really going through the selection process and deciding what are the best investment bets for our company to make, what projects should we really tackle at this point in time, we have a very powerful what-if modeling capability that allows us to really do some scenario planning. In this regard, we can select potential and active portfolio items, look at what the aggregate cost or resource requirements are going to be. We can actually overlay targets and basically see whether or not, as you can see in this more heat map type of depiction at the bottom of the modeler, whether or not we're over or under our budget or over or under our capacity given the current selection of projects and potential projects that we're evaluating. We can do a combination of deselecting projects that may be lower in priority. We could actually move projects to later times and defer them so that we can relieve the immediate resource need and say do some of these things later. And some combination of those things we can do to come up with a portfolio that we can do within our dollar and our headcount constraints. We can save as many different scenarios here as you would like. At the end of the day, from the portfolio management perspective, we can evaluate all criteria that you want to capture around these project portfolio items, whether it be cost, headcount, risk, strategic fit, other dimensions, things like your net presence value or internal rates of return. These are all things that we can capture and rank our projects against and really give us some good objective measures and a consistent scoring mechanism so that we can value projects in a very consistent way. With that, I'd like to take us into the actual solution and show you some of this stuff in action. PortfolioEngine, like all of the solutions that we have in our family, is a SharePoint-based solution. We offer this as a licensed solution that you can install right into your SharePoint server farm. We install as features and solutions into your SharePoint environment. Or we offer it as an online service that you can subscribe to, where we provide the full environment, pretty turnkey, that's pretty well configured and templated so that you can get going from day one. The idea, the way you consume the product is totally up to you. We have a lot of folks that actually start online with the full intention of bringing it in-house later on, and we have a very streamlined way to actually take your solution and move it into in-house to your infrastructure at any given point in time. But much like any other SharePoint environment, you authenticate in as a particular user. Here I'm this fictional Steve Masters person, and given that, I come to a landing page. And here it's representing to me portfolio items that I am particularly involved in. Either I'm a member of it, I'm an owner of it, etc. And I can see the ones that I'm involved with personally here at any given point in time. You can have charting web parts that track different metrics here. All these things we have are out of the box. But the idea as a new person into this process, you have a place that's your home page that has information that's relevant to you. Ultimately, though, we're looking at a portfolio center that has the full roster or full list of portfolio items. And in this case, we can have any number of views of this portfolio. We have a lot out of the box that we give you. In this case, I'm looking at a portfolio executive summary view that has some metrics here based upon the portfolio items that we have. Different attributes like what business initiatives they align with, which life cycle stage they're in, and et cetera, et cetera. And we'll talk more about some of the metrics here in a little bit. But to get these items on the radar or into the mix, it's simply a matter of having someone who has the access to do so to be able to go in and suggest a portfolio item. Here we have a rich form that gives you the ability to enter the data that's required. Things like your portfolio name and description and the benefits that you hope to derive. You might have a project manager you have in mind right now. You might not. The life cycle stages here can model your life cycle and your stage gates that you actually want to manage. The idea here being is that we can follow that process that you've already established or help you establish a new one or your organization for a more governance process within the project onboarding process. Things like estimated budget, etc. This is information that we provide you these forms with values that are commonly used out of the box, but these can all be modified and can all have values and fields added that reflect the totality of the things that you want to capture about these projects. So for example, if you notice here, just to get the initial piece on here, there's only 2 tabs of information that's really required. Here's the minimum of what we say, in this case, in this scenario, we expect for you to enter in order to get this in the mix and be considered for further evaluation. Okay? Now, back here, whether through workflow approval or through selection through a stage gate owner, you can actually move these up through different stages of the life cycle stage. And notice as it progresses, you may make available now additional tabs of information that is requested in order to get it to yet the next gate or next stage of the life cycle process. So from a planning perspective, you may start now saying, here's when we anticipate doing it. Here's the work effort we're expected. Here's a revised budget estimate. And also some more advanced information on how you might want to rank these projects, like how well it aligns with corporate objectives. What type of cost reduction might we expect to get out of this project? Will it improve employee satisfaction? Is there risk associated with it? And to what degree are we taking on risk if we do this project? And by the way, here's some examples of what we provide out of the box. But if you have other criteria that you use to score projects, we can add these very simply and very easily here. What's nice about this, as you select these different categories and rankings of project assessment here, behind this is a scoring and weighted scoring that can allow us to score this by these each individual categories and provide a blended weighted score for the entire project, weighting these different categories of ranking appropriately according to the way that you see them within your organization. The key here is we can capture this information very simply and provide behind the scenes an objective scoring mechanism that will help us compare projects on a more objective basis. So as we go on through here, notice that the portfolio items that we have are leveraging those values and giving us information like return on investment, like a weighted prioritization score that factored in all of those different parameters that we did. And the idea here is that you can then further enhance this by quantifying certain other dimensions or aspects of these projects. For example, on the strategic merger and evaluation portfolio item, I can start building a capacity plan. By highlighting that portfolio item, I can open up a capacity planner for this. Now, to save some time on the data entry, I could very easily just add a requirement or a commitment to these things, but here in this particular model, since it's a proposed item and hasn't really been selected yet, I'm really looking at on a role basis, what roles am I going to need to fill on this project? And here I'm choosing to plan it on an FTE basis. You know, what percentage of a person's availability would be available? For example, a project manager would be needed 25% of their time here by estimation over a 3-month period. A business analyst would be needed 50% of their time in the first month and then 25% thereafter. And you can choose to do this kind of planning either on an FTE or full-time equivalent basis or by FTE percentage or on a hard number of hours you might want to put in these on any kind of time period basis that you would like. The key here is from a top level, from a top-down perspective, and long before you have a detailed schedule, we can actually start planning the capacity of what we're going to need and what the resource ask is for this particular project. What's nice about this is it just doesn't just stop at this preliminary basis. For example, later on, if I want to actually put a name to this project management requirement here, or this project manager requirement, I can actually find matches and find people that actually are available and what their remaining availability is and that fit the right organizational and role profile. And by that process, I can actually select somebody who has the skill set and the availability to fit this need here, and I can actually promote them to actually being the project manager on this specific project, fulfilling as we go through the life cycle, really tagging a name and actually picking a project manager and folks for these other roles as we go on through. What's nice about this is that we can really use this in either a more standalone planning mode or enable what we call a negotiation mode so that your project management, your let's just say PMO type of function, and your functional or resource management groups can actually go through a negotiation process where the ask is more generic and the functional manager may actually respond with the who and the resource that's specifically needed or available to do the work on a specific project. Another dimension of this is that we may want to do detailed budgeting. So on the same portfolio item, let me open up the cost planner. This cost planner allows us to do a few things. One, I can define fully in great detail the categories for my organization that we want to budget to. So these are just examples. Whatever your budget categories are internally, they would be mirrored right here and identified in this budgeting tool. Also, we've developed two different, let's just say, item types or category types where the labor category types are actually built up not just by entering dollars for the budget, but by putting in either hours or FTEs into a quantity field, which then in turn will calculate a cost value for those. We also have other ones that aren't rate driven, but you might want to have things like materials and contracts and software and travel and expense that you might want to enter hard dollar values in here. Ultimately, whatever your categories are, and however you want to build up those costs, whether from a quantity times a rate or from a hard dollar perspective, it is going to tally up in a time phase budget up to a total cost or budget for this particular project. Meaning we can look at that at the portfolio item level, but it's all backed up by very detailed line item justification. Now, so far I've just talked about a budget cost type. We can also have other cost types. So, for example, I could check out all the actual costs. So if I want to look at the same categories and I want to look at what we're actually spending according to our budget, we can actually capture this. For example, out of the box, our labor categories will tie very nicely into our timesheet capability. We have a built-in time reporting capability that as people record actual hours, we can compare actual hours against what was planned from a budget perspective. We can also enter in the hard dollar costs either by entering these things in from reports that we get from our procurement system, or we have a large number of customers who actually are using their financial or ERP system to provide us this information for those comparisons. And what's nice is within a single view, I could actually compare both of them in the same place. So here I'm looking at a budget on the top, and if I want to look at a reference, I can say show a reference copy at the bottom, and then the bottom I would show the actuals. So now in a split screen, I can look at the comparison between the budget and the actuals all in one place. Now you can have as many different cost types as you want across the top here. Here I'm just showing budget and actuals. Some folks want to do budget and actuals. Some folks want to do revised forecasts as well, and other categories that help them identify different permutations or different iterations of what the cost plan might be and compare them to the others. But either way, the cost and budget values are going to go a long way to help us even in the selection process, but carries also value once we go into execution. So let's just say we've done this scoring. We've looked at our resource capacity, and we've done cost planning. What are different ways we may want to use that information, since it's all tied together nicely in one solution, as opposed to people doing various things in a variety of spreadsheets that are separate and distinct from one another? One way we might want to look at this is, say, from a functional manager's perspective. I've done capacity plans across all these different portfolio items, but how does it affect me from a functional manager's perspective? If I went into the resource center and I want to look at capacity and demand, even though I planned on a portfolio item by portfolio item basis, let's just say I'm in charge of the software development group. If I want to look at resource plan information for just that group, I can pick the time periods. I can pick the horizon on which I want to look at it. Let me pick out, say, for a year. And then as I display it, now I'm looking at all the portfolio items that my group is committed to, the resources that have been committed, the FTEs or the hours that have been committed for those folks. But more importantly, I can look and aggregate down below here, and for each individual resource, I can actually see whether or not this portfolio mix is over or under committing those resources. Here I can see, based upon the current state of planning, that I'm actually overcommitting quite a number of my resources within this group. I can also aggregate these things in different forms. So let's just say I didn't want to total them down below by, say, individual resource, but just by the roles that they fulfill or which groups that they are actually in. So if I get rid of that level of detail, for example, down below now, it's aggregating that commitment now by the roles that these people are actually contributing to. And I can see now that overall, my system architect and tester hours seem to be within capacity, but my DBAs and my developers have some constraints here in what we're going to do. And as we're going through the negotiation process, a functional manager can come in here, say go into the CBT implementation project, and actually say edit the resource plan, and within their purview they can just choose to use the capacity planner that we showed you earlier on, and actually choose maybe different candidates or different resources that might fill the bill to relieve some of the over-allocation specific resources might have. So it's all integrated. You have one point of entry for this information, but multiple uses, slicing it either from a portfolio item perspective, or here what we're looking at from a functional group or a departmental perspective. All this information can be looked at graphically as well, so we can look at totals graphs to see whether or not we're over or under capacity. Here we can see as a group we have certain peaks that as a group we're over-allocated, but where we really have our issue seems to be in that DBA group, where it looks like from a percentage perspective we have a fairly sizable overcommitment consistently across the board. Another way that we can use this information is to go back to the Portfolio Center and really evaluate scenarios. Because in this portfolio, you could have a mix of actively managed projects and projects that are at various stages of consideration as candidates to become active projects. In this case, if I wanted to look at all my active and potential projects, I can select the entire mix here, for example, and I can go up and I can select our modeler. And our modeler can be actually looked at from either a cost or from a resource perspective. And if I go into the modeler first, what it will do is it will take all of the projects that I selected to be part of this scenario, and once again this is scenario modeling, and it has them all selected, and it also shows me down below now from, in this case it's showing me from a cost perspective, what the aggregate requirement is going to be from my different cost categories, from my budgets, what it's going to take to do everything that we've selected for this scenario. But what does that mean looking at these numbers? Well, it becomes more meaningful if we actually look at a target. What is our current staffing level or our current budget? And if we apply that measure or that standard against this aggregate need for this portfolio, we can go in and take a look and see that if we do all of these projects, there are definitely categories of labor and other things here that we are over budget or over capacity on. So from a dollar perspective, we're over budget here on things like our infrastructure resource, pretty consistently across this time horizon. If I wanted to look at this same scenario but look at, say, FTEs or headcount required for these different categories, I can see that from just a headcount perspective or an FTE perspective, I don't have the headcount to do everything that's here in the mix. Now, we can look at things like, you know, where things are at from a prioritization score, from a return on investment, other information that we're capturing around these portfolio items. And the idea is, as we're looking at that, we can do a couple things in this scenario. For example, we could say, well, we can't do all of this, so maybe we should start deselecting. And I'll just randomly say if these were the, let's just say the lower priority projects, I can get this down to where, all right, we've gotten rid of some of the over-allocation here, but not all of it. So what I've done here is I've actually taken a look here and I'm saying, all right, well, I've gotten, if I don't do these projects, I can get closer to my capacity on what I'm looking at here. I could also go down through here and I could say, you know, maybe I got to take a project like this exchange implementation, and maybe part of the solution would be I have to do these, but I really need to defer it and do it later. Now, maybe a combination of deselecting projects and staging these projects in different time frames, I now have a headcount need here, what looks more doable, what I can do from an FTE perspective on these different items. So the idea here, I can do scenario modeling, I can save versions of these scenarios, and I can compare them. And as a steering committee, as a governance team, etc., I can compare these and come to some consensus or agreement of what's the right mix of projects for right now, and what's the timing on those projects for us to do them. Or conversely, we can look at this from a headcount perspective and see where our gaps are and see where we might be willing to contract additional headcount or hire. The idea of a very powerful modeling scenario that allows us to evaluate these things. And once again, we're using information that was entered in a single place. in a single tool and allowing us to evaluate these things in a very intelligent fashion. From a views perspective, as I'm looking at the attributes of my different portfolio, I can look at these portfolio items in a variety of different ways. If I wanted to say, let me look at these strictly by their portfolio scoring, I can go in and start looking at ROI, prioritization, what their cost reduction rating, employee satisfaction, risk ratings, etc. The idea is like whatever ratings that I have in place for my portfolio, I can look at very easily, and I can have any number of views. So if I wanted to say, for example, look at by how well these portfolio items align, I can look at a view that's basically aligned with how the strategic alignment and what strategic alignment values we're actually aligning with these portfolio items. I can also look at things like where things are at from their life cycle stages. So I can look at the progress, and I can look at this portfolio and slice through and graphically see which of these portfolio items are actually in the various life cycle stages that we're progressing through as we evaluate the portfolio. The key here is you have some very flexible viewing that you can do for this portfolio. We also have an out-of-the-box report center. And this report center allows us to use some out-of-the-box reporting to do things like look at, let me just pick out a project tracking summary. The idea is to aggregate this information and provide you views on demand on how well these things are tracking and how well they're progressing. The metrics in here can all be modified by you, the user, but the idea we provide a lot of out-of-the-box reporting for you. What's also nice is as opposed to these reporting views, we also have the ability to use SQL reporting services. Since all of our data is here in SharePoint and it's in a SQL database on the back end, we provide a number of out-of-the-box reports in SQL reporting services that you can use. And you can actually add to this library yourself if you have your own specialized needs or vision of what these reports should be. For example, a common thing that people do in portfolio management is look at bubble chart reporting. And if I wanted to look at a bubble chart report that compared, say, for example, strategic alignment versus risk on the projects and put that into a bubble chart, we could run that report. And now we can see from the projects which ones actually fall into which quadrants or areas of this particular chart. So if I was looking at things that were high strategic alignment and low risk, I would think the sweet spot up here would be this upper left corner. And we can take a look at what projects and hover over here and see which projects and what those values are of the projects that are in this mix. Now, ideally, any parameter that you have that you're scoring your projects against, you can actually have a chart like this created to compare those types of parameters. The nice thing about the SQL reporting services reports, let me go back there if I might, is let me look at strategic alignment versus budget. That might be something else to look at. So same type of scenario, but doing a bubble chart grid compared on different parameters. So strategic alignment versus the budget and the cost. High strategic alignment, low cost, very attractive up here in the upper right. The key here is I can do this, but what's nice about the SSRS reporting is that I could take these reports and either view them in this online viewer, or I can put them out to common formats. In a lot of organizations, folks still insist on having reports pushed out to them. So putting this report out into a PDF or a Word doc or an Excel file, et cetera, can be very attractive for a lot of organizations. And our reporting database that allows you to tap this and our reporting solution really enhances that capability and doesn't force you to have to create all this stuff from scratch out of the box. Now, from an execution perspective, we do have the ability for people to record time. We have folks that really don't go all out on the execution side of managing the portfolio. They use the PortfolioEngine strictly as a strategic planning tool. But let's just say you have a group of active portfolio items that are in the Portfolio Center, and you focus down on the ones that are actively being managed. We do have a timesheet capability within the solution that allows you to report time and track actuals against these projects, even if you don't have any other detailed planning around this. The idea of the projects or the project items themselves or any tasks you created around them, you can report time against those and then capture your actuals right here within the solution. Another aspect is if you wanted to take this portfolio selection process another stage further, we can carry it into execution, much like you do our standalone Workengine tool. And the idea here is that you could extend the active projects that you do, and you could actually extend this and create affiliated workspaces where the details of the execution on these portfolio items can be managed. So this workspace, which is totally aligned with that portfolio item, would now have all the details in the project that you'd wish to manage. You know, your detailed schedule later on, your issues, your risks, your change requests, lower level action items and to-dos, document libraries for your artifacts and deliverables, discussion boards, and other project level reporting. And the idea is that we can then manage these tasks within these workspaces. So the key is that we could go full life cycle from the true PPM capability and PortfolioEngine that it brings uniquely to the party, but really extend into the execution sides of things with project workspaces fully aligned with those portfolio items. So let's transition back to the slides. Hopefully we've showed you today that right within SharePoint, PortfolioEngine, either online or in a licensed solution on your own environment, we can provide you with really high-end portfolio management capabilities for selection and evaluation of projects, and really transition those into execution and management of those projects. We'd love to see you get hands-on with this solution, so I just want to let you all know that you can get a free trial today. Go to epmlive.com and request a free trial. And we can get you hands-on with an environment that would allow you to create projects and see for yourself and do for yourself a lot of the things that I showed you here today. It's pretty open as far as the things that allow you to do. So it's really not a canned, scripted thing. It's really something that gives you access to the full body of the solution. So I would really encourage you to go to epmlive.com or contact us at info@epmlive.com or call us at this toll-free number. Also, I wanted to make everyone here aware of a year-end promotion that we're having. If this is something that you want or want to buy any of the capabilities of our product family, we are actually offering for PortfolioEngine and Workengine free user training for each license or annual online subscription purchased. So if you buy a 25 user license, we would give you 25 training vouchers to go through full user training with our solution. That's normally paid for separately, and we're offering to bundle that in at no additional charge for you. The key here on the year-end promotion, to get the free training, you must purchase by December 31st, and the training vouchers themselves are valid for 6 months, so you can recoup those vouchers anytime within the 6 months following December 31st to actually participate in the training. So very high value to get the training, which often comes at a significant cost of deployment on that training piece. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time today. Hopefully we covered and showed you how PortfolioEngine can take you through all the primary things that need to be done in a portfolio management and project selection process, and showing you how it can be done within SharePoint. Our value proposition there really is to leverage what you already own, get more value out of your existing, your investment and commitment to SharePoint, and really use tools that your users are familiar with. So learning curve is a very small item in your deployment considerations. Once again, thank you for joining us today and your time, and hope you all have a great day.